We're back. Brand new video. Today I want to talk about Bloodlust. If you've been on Twitter, you're probably going to see that a lot of people are talking about Bloodlust right now. It's a pretty popular topic. For whatever reason, a lot of survivors, well, actually it doesn't really surprise me since Twitter is like super survivor-sided, but a lot of survivors believe that Bloodlust should no longer be in the game. Killer mains crying that Made for This is OP and rewards you for playing poorly when they've had Bloodlust since patch 1.5.0 that makes you 120% speed after just 15 seconds of not catching someone. Totally a fair comparison. Now this is a tweet that I see often. A lot of the mechanics are outdated. Bloodlust rewards poor gameplay from the killer. However, map reworks would help make this not an issue if they did it right. I also see stuff like this. Bloodlust tier 1 is needed for some loops IMO. Bloodlust tier 2 and 3 are outdated and only reward bad killers for being in a chase too long. Yes, very. It rewards bad players. I think Bloodlust 2 and 3 can safely be removed from the game, but Bloodlust 1 in particular for M1 killers like Pig and Trapper for example, I feel is still a necessary mechanic.
Bro, she is just a Bloodlust fucking maniac, bro. These are the killers, man. These are the killers behavior protects, man.
The nerve to complain about Bloodlust when you have beautiful windows that are so broken on Haddonfield and you're going against an M1 killer. Man. Bloodlust was introduced to this game 6 years ago. That was a very, very long time. Obviously the game has changed a lot since then. Now because of behavior adding Bloodlust to the game because of bad map design, for whatever reason within these 6 years we still haven't gotten better maps or just better designed maps. I mean, think of maps like Garden of Joy. That one window in main is so fucking brutal. Shack leads into some pretty good filler palettes if the RNG is good, next to a nice little jungle gym, and jungle gym leads right into parking lot, which is awful for killer. Badham Preschool is still super survivor-sided. I'm very surprised that behavior hasn't touched those maps at all. And Mother's Dwelling, which is possibly one of the worst reworks they've ever done. Oh, this map is too big? Hold on, I have an idea. Let's keep it the same size and add really good palettes. That's exactly what everyone wanted. Suffo Pit has some insanely good tiles and jungle gyms. Groaning Storehouse has that one window in main that is so brutal it's just not even worth chasing half the time. I could go on about certain maps being absolutely nuts, but I think you get the point. All of this leads us to our topic of today. Should Bloodlust be removed from the game? Is it truly an outdated mechanic? Well, no. Bloodlust is fine. I think it's totally fine. And I want to go over the reasons for why I think that's the case, and hopefully I can convince you for all the people that don't believe me. Alright, here's my tier list for killers that need Bloodlust and killers that don't need it. Starting all the way at the top are the killers that don't need it at all. Nurse, Blight, and Spirit, I'm going to do them together because they're all up here for the same reason. They have very good mobility and they're able to catch you with that mobility. Now, if Bloodlust were removed from the game, these killers probably wouldn't be affected at all. Now we have Artist. Artist isn't a killer that's quick in any way, but her projectiles are probably the best in the game. They're the only ones that can go through walls. So because of that, you're able to put a lot of pressure on certain loops just by putting the birds in the area. And because of that, because of how strong the anti-loop is for her, she doesn't need Bloodlust at all. She's mostly getting downs with her birds. And if they're not at the loop, they're going to run away from the loop. You can always put more birds in different areas. She's just really good. Her projectiles are so good that she really doesn't need Bloodlust at all. Next on the list, we got Wesker. Now, Wesker's a killer with really high mobility. However, the only reason he's not at the top is because he can be map dependent. Some maps can be pretty bad for him, like Larry's, Toba Landing, Borgo, any map that has a lot of stuff or collisions or things that are in the way for him to bump into, that's going to cause him to not really use his power as effectively. However, since his power is so good either way, he's definitely at the top of this list. I really wanted to put him all the way at the top, but it's just some maps really screw him over. So because of that, he is where he is. Next we have Pyramid Head. Pyramid Head is very simple. Probably won't take long explaining why he's up here. He has a really good anti-loop. That's it. He really doesn't need Bloodlust at all. Alien. Alien's in a weird spot right now because Alien just came out but the power that they have is just strange. It seems like there's no sort of cooldown when you're using your power, so even if you miss, there's no repercussions for missing, so you can just keep going. Obviously it's not infinite, you can't spam it, but there's just no downside to trying to hit with your power. Because of that, Alien does not need Bloodlust as of right now. I don't know if they're going to change that, but right now Alien does not need Bloodlust. Next we have Demo. Now Demo is pretty much good at everything, or at least decent, but his best ability is his Shred, without a doubt. Similar to Pyramid Head, Shred can put a lot of pressure if they know, okay, I'm going for Shack Window, but Demo's right behind me charging his Shred, so it might not be worth it. There's like a whole mind game around it. The only thing is that Demo has to charge it a little bit to get the full length, but other than that, he's totally fine. Doesn't need Bloodlust. Next we have Knight, who I don't like. Knight's ability is basically just zoning you. So if you're in a loop, let's just say you're in a jungle gym, he's going to put the guard in the jungle gym, he's going to force you to leave the jungle gym, and then you chase and you M1. It's not like Artist where you actually use the birds to attack the survivor. The guard is mostly there just to get you out of any safe loop. And yeah, that's about it. He doesn't need Bloodlust. Next we have Twins. In pubs with random solo queue players, you're probably going to stomp on them. What happens in solo queue is you will use Victor, Victor will attack a survivor, and the survivor will immediately remove Victor off of them. However, in a Swift, the Swift will usually hold on to Victor for as long as they possibly can. Because of this, the survivor can't do anything. So for temporary moments throughout the match, it turns into a 3v1, and Twins is an M1 killer, just for that short period of time. But because of that one person not being able to do anything, it kind of makes it even-ish, I guess. Regardless, Twins does not need Bloodlust. Also, fun fact, Victor is literally 150 speed, your average killer is 115, and survivors are 100. Victor is so goddamn fast. So that should tell you why Twins doesn't need Bloodlust. Next we have Nemesis and Oni. Nemesis and Oni suffer a similar fate, but more so for Oni, which we will get into. Nemesis has a weaker start of the game, so you need your power. Your power is at level 1. It doesn't do well, although you can do something with it, but it's not as good. Once you get it to like level 2 or 3, you're really hard to stop. A lot of windows become really unsafe to vault. It's a pretty good anti-loop mechanic, but because in the beginning of the game, you're not going to have a good time. But because he has a good power, he really doesn't need Bloodlust. Now Oni, on the other hand, Oni's power is way better than Nemesis, but a big issue that you'll run into is that in solo queue, you're fine. Players will give you the first hit, whatever, doesn't matter. Against a Swift that knows what they're doing, they will, whichever survivor you chase first will pre-drop every pallet and make sure you have no opportunity to hit them to get your power. But at some point, Oni will get his power. So until then, he's an M1 killer. Once he gets his power, he's totally fine. But with that weak start game, or beginning of the, whatever you call it, the weak beginning of the game, he kind of falls behind until he gets a hit. But yeah, for the most part, he doesn't need Bloodlust. Now, Trickster, Huntress, and Deathslinger all suffer from the same issue. Meningitis. I'm kidding. They suffer from being 110 killers with good M2s, but are very map dependent. So if you're getting Larry's, if you're getting Tobo Landing, if you're getting maps that have a lot of line of sight breakers, these killers can be really hard to manage. But because their M2s for the most part are really good, Bloodlust isn't as necessary for these killers. But they are on the weaker end because of their speed and their high map dependency. Moving on to situational. Plague. Now, Plague is very interesting. It really depends on the randoms that you get. Now, I know sometimes we don't always get the brightest randoms.
Look at this bitch cleanse. You have so many. Why are you cleansing Sierra? Oh my god. I don't understand these people.
But if you're going up against a Swift, it can be really difficult for Plague. And the reason being is that we are in a non-healing meta. It is probably better to be injured in most cases because of Made for This and Resilience. And because of that, those two perks really mess with her. Without her power, she basically is just an M1 killer. However, she can always get her power at least once throughout the match. So there is that, but that's not worth the trade-off, especially with the meta that we're in now. So Swift that don't cleanse, very hard. She's just an M1 killer. Solo queue, you're fine. Everyone is cleansing. You're getting your power. You're good. So that's why she's here. Next, we have Bubba. I know some of you are probably thinking, but all Bubba's have to do is go to the basement and camp it. That's not why I'm putting him here. I'm putting him here because depending on the maps that you get, it can be pretty difficult for Bubba to use his chainsaw. And if you're an experienced survivor, you'll know how to loop him, and most of the time Bubba's will M1 you. If they can't seem to get a chainsaw off you because your pathing is optimal and you're always making a window, they will resort to M1s. However, if you're in an open map that doesn't have a lot of clutter, he doesn't really need Bloodlust. It all depends, honestly. Next, we have Singularity. Now, Singularity is very, very map dependent. If you are getting a map with a shit ton of line of sight breakers and bad places to put your power, he's not that good. Certain maps, however, are really good for him. Borgo is surprisingly really good because it is very open and there are a lot of higher places to put your power for you to scout the area easier and for you to hit your victims. So it really depends on the map with him. Out of all the people to put on this list, I feel like Singularity was probably the one I had the hardest time putting. I don't know where to put him. I still don't even know if he should be situational. So be sure to let me know in the comments what you think. And Billy. Billy suffers from the same issue with Bubba, except it's even harder to use Billy. If you get Billy in Larry's, you're screwed. If you get Billy in Toba Landing, you're screwed. He's very map dependent as well, similar to Bubba. They have the same issue. But unlike Bubba, if you're in a really open map, you benefit way more with Billy because not only are you more likely to hit your chainsaw, you also get the mobility that he gives you because he moves really fast. So he's pretty situational. Moving on to the next tier, we have Pinhead in the kinda needs Bloodlust tier. Now, Pinhead is interesting because he is a pub stomper. If you have a team that's not very coordinated, you're probably going to win most of your games with Pinhead, especially if you're decent with him. But unlike most of the killers that I've mentioned, he still needs to use his M1 to hit, even though he has an okay M2, sometimes pretty good if you're good at hitting your chains. He's good at stopping you at certain loops, especially semi-safe loops. You're screwed against him if he can hit his chains, but if you know how to dodge his chains and you're on a really safe loop, especially Shaq, it can be pretty difficult to optimize your playstyle with Pinhead. Some survivors are very advanced and there's just really not much you can do. Especially when they take the box, they run away, you really can't get your power that often. For the most part, he is an M1 killer. But he has a little bit of anti-loop if you're good with his chains. But if you're solo queue, you're fine. You're going to destroy most of your players you're going against anyways. Next, we have Wraith. Wraith has a nice ability. You can cloak yourself, you can move really fast. You can't hit anyone in your cloak, but you can uncloak at certain loops or pallets. If you can block a window correctly, if you know how to body block with him, you're fine. But against more experienced survivors, it can be pretty difficult. If you know how to body block, you can body block him, body blocking you, which can allow you to make it to certain windows. If you're at Shaq and you're constantly vaulting over and over and over, because you're not in chase technically, he has to uncloak to chase you. So depending on the kind of team that you're going against, Wraith can use Bloodlust. It can really help him out. Next, we have Doctor. Doctor has a nice anti-loop ability, but his main issue is that if you are running to a window and you are spamming the vault button as you're running there, the animation will not cancel. So there are times, especially if you're a Doctor main, you'll see this. You'll shock the person, they'll still scream, but make the vault. That's because they've already locked into the animation of running at the vault and there's nothing you can do to stop it. However, if they made it to where you could cancel it, I would say he doesn't belong in this tier. He probably would be in the doesn't need it tier. But because the animation does not cancel, it doesn't matter. He needs Bloodlust. Moving on to Dredge. Dredge has nice mobility in the sense that it's kind of like Demo where he can just move around in certain lockers and that's cool to catch up to certain areas. But at the end of the day, he is an M1 killer. The only reason he's not in the really needs it category is because he does have a little bit of an anti-loop, and if you use it well, it can work out. Although it's not amazing, it's really good at stopping semi-safe loops, like certain pallets that are just not exactly like Shaq level of safe, but safe enough for you to mind game. He totally destroys that. So that's cool. But he still needs Bloodlust. And Clown. Now, Clown, if you don't know how to play against Clown, it can be really frustrating. The only reason he's here is because The counterplay to him is not that hard. All you really have to do against Clown is just pre-drop. Don't give him the chance to catch up. Force him to break the pallet, and that'll give you time to make it to your next loop, which is unfortunate because Clown is terrible. It's not that good. He definitely benefits from Bloodlust pretty well. But since he can slow you down with his bottles, he doesn't need it as much as the other characters beneath him. Moving on to the really needs Bloodlust tier, starting with Skull Merchant. Now, similar to Bubba, if you're just doing a basement Bubba and you're just doing a 3-gen Skull Merchant, obviously you don't need Bloodlust. But if you play this killer like a normal human being and not like an insufferable asshole, then you will see that her kit is pretty bad. She is an M1 killer with drones, and you have time to react to the drones, you have time to lead the drones. If she might pull it out of loop and then you have to lead the loop, although there are certain add-ons that could boost up your speed when you're in the drone and the survivors will slow down, so there's some things you can do to help out, but she's still an M1 killer. She is terrible. The only reason she's at the top is because if you're managing your gens correctly and you're not playing like an asshole at the start, you can choose to 3-gen at the end and you're probably gonna win. Moving on to Ghostface. I love Ghostface, he's awesome. But in the end of the day, he is an M1 killer without a doubt. Him being able to get you exposed is pretty cool, it's strong, but in the end of the day, he has to M1 you no matter what. He doesn't have mobility with the exception of, I think, very few. I think one add-on is purple. He has to chase you. He just has to chase you as a 115 M1 killer. And the worst part is that if you're playing against a Swift and you get exposed, what will happen is that a healthy person who's not exposed will come and take the hit, and at some point, you have to hit them. If they're bad at body blocking, whatever. But if they're not bad at body blocking, you have to either hit them and choose who to chase. You're either going to let that person who was exposed get away or chase the injured person. So even against a Swift, he's just really hard for Ghostface to make a comeback. So that's why I think he needs Bloodlust. Really bad. Moving on to Onryo. Now, Onryo, similar to Pinhead, you're a pub stomper. You are going to destroy people, especially with the new changes that they made to her. Some people don't know how to counter her. It is so unbelievably easy. All you have to do is grab a tape as soon as you can and hold on to it. It is better for you to take the hit and receive 2 condemn stacks than for her to teleport every 10 seconds and slowly condemn you. If randoms figured this out, she would be even worse than what she already is. She's not that good. She's only good against people who are inexperienced. Once you put her up against a decent Swift, she's fucked. If everyone is holding a tape and she's trying to do that condemned shit, she has to chase. And she doesn't really have mobility. So she's just, for the most part, she's just an M1 killer with the ability to teleport every now and then. No different than Dredge or Demo. Except Demo has a shred and Dredge has a little anti-loop thing going on. So yeah, Onryo really needs Bloodlust. Moving on to Legion. Now, Legion and Plague are very similar. They have an injured playstyle. You have to be injured in order to get value out of Legion. Unfortunately for Legion, his power is not very good. If everyone stays injured and chooses not to heal, that's fine, because again, we are in a injured meta. Everyone is running made for this, everyone is running resilience. It's totally fine. Him and Plague suffer a lot because of this meta. So Legion really benefits from Bloodlust. Moving on to Hag. Hag is 110 for whatever reason. I don't know why she's not 115. She is still 110. She is very slow, and her power is very easy to avoid if you know where the traps are. Now, solo queue, you're not going to know where she puts all of her traps, although it is safe to assume that some areas already have a trap. So if you're in the Groaning Storehouse, you know that really good window in main is probably trapped. If you're in Garden of Joy, you can assume that the window downstairs in main is also trapped. So if the survivors are smart, even if they're solo queue, if they're smart, they'll know where not to run, or at the very least, they'll check the area before they even get in a chase and know, okay, is it safe to go here? Yes? All right, I'm going here. That doesn't even begin to describe Swifts, because Swifts could easily just run behind her, similar to Trapper, and just disarm all of her shit. So yeah, Hag needs Bloodlust badly. Moving on to Trapper, who also suffers a similar issue, except he's 115. The only difference is that his traps are big. They are massive. So they're very easy to see, which is why I put him beneath Hag, because it's really easier to mess with Trapper and just mess up everything that he's doing. Usually what will happen with a Swift, or at least that one person in a solo queue team that knows what's up, they'll follow the trapper and just disarm all of his traps behind him. Even if you have that one eerie add-on that injures you when you disarm it, it still doesn't matter, because again, we are in an injured meta. It's probably safer for that survivor who's running made for this to be injured anyways. Totally fine. And just like Hag, if you know certain loops are really strong, it's safe to assume that there's a trap there. I remember when I used to play Trapper, I would try to get people to run into Shack, and they would rather take the M1 than vault the window, because they're assuming that there's a trap there. So survivors are pretty smart. Because of that, Trapper really needs Bloodlust. Moving on to Peg. I feel bad because her power is actually pretty good. Her slowdown is amazing. Having the traps on your head, forcing you to take it off and wasting time, awesome. But in the end of the day, she is an M1 killer. She doesn't really have anything else going for her. Like, yes, her stealth is cool, but if depending on the map that you get, it can really fuck with you. For the most part, she is terrible. I think most people can acknowledge that she's really bad. She's just an M1 killer. There's no other way around it. She really needs Bloodlust. Moving on to Myers. Myers is such an outdated killer. It's kind of crazy. He's the only killer that can run out of his power. And even, let's just say you're running really good add-ons like the Infinite Exposed, it doesn't matter because, again, we're in an injured meta. Everyone would much rather be injured and run around and have made for this, have resilience, forcing you to constantly chase and running really good loops or pallets or windows or whatever it is that you want to run, jungle gyms. Myers gets absolutely fucked. I can't even begin to imagine people wanting to play Myers if Bloodlust was removed from the game. Now, there are certain things that are absolutely broken, like Tombstone Piece, which I personally think shouldn't be in the game, but that's a different topic for some other day. And finally, we have Freddy. Now, the reason I put Freddy beneath Myers is because he is straight up just M1. If Freddy had an exposed status thing like Myers, I'd probably put him in front of Myers, but because it's super safe to heal against Freddy, and he's already just an M1 killer, there really isn't much you can do with Freddy. Now, the teleporting is cool, the lunge is cool, dream pallets are cool if you're not paying attention to which pallets are being dropped. Now, you're not going to know if you're solo queue, so sometimes solo queue Freddy can be really frustrating to deal with. But against a Swift that has comms and they're decent at the game, they can tell you which pallets aren't dropped. It really depends on the Freddy. But I just think Freddy and Myers could probably be interchangeable, maybe, but Freddy's definitely down there, especially because you can heal against him. Like, there really is no downside. And yeah, this is my list. Feel free to talk in the comments below what you think about this list. I have no problem talking about this. I'm not a fucking genius. This is just my personal opinion. I got my hair done in the middle of the video. You already know what the fuck's going on. I think the main issue that people have with being chased and Bloodlust is that people seem to forget that it's not a 1v1. Like, yes, you're getting chased. You and that killer have a 1v1 interaction, but behind the scenes, ideally, there are 3 other people working on the gen. So it's not just a 1v1. You're basically wasting as much time of the killer as you possibly can by holding on with the chase. So from the killer's point of view, it feels really underwhelming to not be able to catch up. Survivors have really good windows, pretty good pallets. If used correctly, the killer's gonna have such a hard time catching you, and I think a lot of people forget that. It's not a one-on-one, it's not a 1v1 at all. Killers are supposed to feel powerful, like they're literally killers, so they're supposed to have some sort of power role between the interaction. That's why I think it's important to remember, from a 1v1 perspective, getting chased, yeah, it's frustrating. From a 4v1 perspective, it absolutely makes sense that the killer is supposed to catch up to you fast. Which leads us to an important part of this video. How necessary is Bloodlust? Now, my friend and I have about 2,500 hours each. Although we mostly play Survivor, we do play Killer, we know how Killer works, and we figured we'd give it a test. So the test itself took about 4 hours of just 1v1ing and testing certain things. We tested Made for This with Bloodlust, we tested No Made for This with Bloodlust, and the most interesting one, which took up most of our time doing this test, we did Made for This and Rapid Brutality. The way Rapid Brutality works is you get a 10% haste after you hit a survivor for 10 seconds. After that, it goes away, you don't get Bloodlust at all. And the interesting part about this perk is that you also don't get Bloodlust even if you don't injure. So you don't get Bloodlust, period. If you get your first hit, even if they're healthy, even if you chase them for 2 minutes, you don't get Bloodlust, which I figured, okay, this would be a good way to test out if Bloodlust is necessary. I basically used Rapid Brutality as a no Bloodlust perk. The reason our test took 4 hours is because of the Rapid Brutality test. All the other games are relatively shorter. Rapid Brutality games lasted really long, and I'd like to show you just how brutal it is to not have Bloodlust. So I figured I'd do some commentary over the gameplay. This test isn't supposed to show the best M1 killer in the world with the most optimal plays imaginable going against a good survivor. Like, no, it's just showing your average M1 killer going up against a decent survivor on a balanced map. Now, we tried to check the box for everything. We had some matches that had good RNG, we had some matches that had bad RNG, there were some optimal plays on my end, there were some mistakes on my end. I really wanted to include everything. Now, I would show every single clip because we did these tests multiple times on each build, but then the video is just going to be 2 hours long, and I definitely don't need a 2 hour long video to convey a point. So I just averaged out each match with each build, and I felt this clip was the best one because I did make some good choices, I did make some mistakes, the RNG was decent, I really wanted to include everything. But yeah, at the end of this clip, I'm going to show you the average length of each game. Originally, I wanted to leave this video at the normal length, but it's just too long. This was actually my shortest game with no Bloodlust. I want to make it clear that I'm not using Rapid Brutality for the haste. I'm using it specifically to demonstrate what it's like to not have Bloodlust. So when I get the speed, I'm not using it effectively. This is just my no Bloodlust perk because it deactivates Bloodlust. Even if the person isn't injured and I'm just chasing them, Bloodlust will not activate at all. It is completely turned off, and I figured this would be a good way to demonstrate what it's like to not have Bloodlust. I also want to point out, because I know some people are going to say this, oh, you're not a good killer, you're not a good killer. That's the point. I'm not trying to be good when I do this. I'm also not trying either. I am trying. I'm just not amazing with an M1 killer. But I know what I'm doing enough to play the game. I'm just showing what it's like for the average killer's experience. Not the best of the best. I could have easily just found some really good M1 killer to end the chase in 50 seconds. That is not your average M1 killer's experience. So before you say, oh, you're not good, I'm trying to be an example of what it's like to be your average killer. Because on M1, I'm pretty average. So I feel like I'm a good example of what it's like to play this game normally. Not cracked, not the best Ghostface, not the best Myers, not the best anything. Just your average M1 killer. We were only able to do a couple of games with this build because each game was taking really long. And the average chase length for test 3 was roughly 8 minutes. So that is triple test 1's duration and more than double test 2. If this isn't enough for you to see how important Bloodlust is for M1 killers, I don't know what to tell you. Now you can say something like, oh, but Adrian, you didn't play that perfectly. Like, you made so many mistakes. And that's true. But I think that proves my point. Your average low tier killer mains are going to suffer terribly without Bloodlust because they're going to make mistakes. Some people play this game for fun. And if they're over here chasing people for 9 minutes, then that's going to be an issue. Now, obviously, I'm just running 1 or 2 perks just to demonstrate something, so it won't take that long. But you best believe that will transfer over if they use that perk, or sorry, if they don't have Bloodlust at all. So if they have other slowdown perks and they simply just can't catch up, it's going to affect their gameplay. It's going to affect the amount of kills they get. It'll affect everything, which leads to the final question. What steps should be taken in order to not need Bloodlust anymore? And the answer is, I don't know. I have ideas of what needs to be done, but how to implement it correctly, I don't know. For one, I think map design is so important. Some maps are just really awful. I mean, Garden of Joy as a killer, especially as an M1 killer, it's so brutal. The main building is so awful to chase. It leads nice into what could be T&L walls or sometimes a jungle gym. You also have Shack, which will always be in the same spot always, which that alone is fine, but it leads into another jungle gym or some tiles that are sometimes there. It really depends. But across from that, you have parking lot, and parking lot, it leads into like everything is just so perfectly leading into safe option, into safe option, into safe option. And that's just one map. Red Forest is another example. This map is way too big. There's way too many safe pallets everywhere. If you're an M2 killer, you're fine. If you're an M1 killer, you're fucked. Same thing with the game map. Some people think the game is super killer-sided. I disagree. I think it depends on the killer. Now, if you're Nurse, obviously it doesn't matter. But if you're Myers and you eat pallet after pallet after pallet after pallet after safe pallet after safe pallet, and by the time you get someone down, the exit gates are ready. Like, that's not fun. So map design would be one thing that I would recommend. Now, what exactly should we design for the maps to be good? I'm not a designer, but I think we can look back at certain maps like Cold Tower, which I think is absolutely fine. I think most people agree Cold Tower is great. I think removing super safe pallets from Mother's Dwelling would be fine. Also reducing the size of the map, not just making it look pretty. But it also leads into another problem where if you do reduce certain things and make things better for killer, now the best killers are really good because certain pallets aren't safe anymore, certain windows aren't going to be safe. So what do we do about that? Well, by then you only have two options. You either nerf the best killers and make them less fun, or you buff the worst killers and make them more fun. But then it also leads into other issues where how are you going to make Myers better? Like, his design is already the way it is. He's an exposed character where you're going to make him fly. Like, how are you going to make him compete with a killer like Wesker or Blight? All of this leads into another question. How do we bridge the gap between bad killers and good killers? Should bad M1 killers have a speed boost? Should they be 120? Should bad killers have a natural slowdown that you have to do like a side objective in order to keep up with the best? Should they be reworked altogether? I don't fucking know. I do think it's an interesting topic though, and I'm very curious as to what non-Bloodlust believers think should be the solution to these problems with lower tier killers, because they're the only ones that are suffering from this. So if you're one of those people, definitely comment your opinions. I want to know what you think would be a good change for these bad M1 killers to keep up with the good ones. For the record, I don't know everything. I'm pretty open-minded. I actually want to have this discussion. I want to see what people think on why Bloodlust shouldn't be in the game. I just did some research. This is what it came out to, so by all means, let me know what you think should be done. My socials will be in the description below, so be sure to check that out, and I will see all of you later. Now, I can go to bed.